Kendal Ozzel was an admiral for the Galactic Empire when we meet him in The Empire Strikes Back. We don't spend much time with him, but there is plenty of story to explore, both in canon and in Legends. Ozzel was born to a wealthy family on the planet Carida. Carida was in the Colonies region, just outside the core. The planet itself has a history that mirrors Ozzel's to a degree. First, it had the Valor space station orbiting it during the Clone Wars. When the Galactic Republic fell away and became the Galactic Empire, an Imperial Academy and a naval docking facility were established. Given his family status and proximity to the core worlds, Ozzel received a thorough education as he grew up. His final formal school was the Republic Naval Academy. Upon graduation, he began his career as an enlisted man with the rank of Captain of the Line. Legends shine some more lights on his early life. I'm separating the details out to avoid confusion, though I find that details that have no replacement or contradictions might as well be considered the official version. Ozzel's family made their money generations before his birth in trade. They also had a long history of naval service. Prestigious families with military histories like this were known as generationals. Cassio Tag, who enters Ozzel's story later, was a generational as well. His formal education in core academies and a naval academy match up with canon, but the reason why is defined better in Legends. Ozzel was the second born, therefore he would not inherit the family business, assets, or land. Military life was what his family saw as the only respectable path left for him. After graduation, his superior officers didn't consider him fit to actually command ships, like his title of Captain of the Line called for. Instead, he was sent to the Academy of Carida to teach before he could serve properly. A Captain of the Line was also called a Senior Captain. It was a mid-level position just under Rear Admiral. These captains commanded a tactical unit that was known as a line of battle. What comprised these lines varied greatly. One Star Destroyer would be considered an entire line, or a line could have as many as 20 smaller ships. An Imperial military leader who would far surpass Ozzel in rank and infamy was none other than Grand Admiral Thrawn, who held the position of Captain of the Line just after the destruction of the first Death Star. Ozzel served the Galactic Republic for years during the Clone Wars. Legend specifies that it was Chancellor Palpatine who appointed him as a captain. I don't think this appointment would be impossible, especially since Palpatine was constantly consolidating powers that his position wasn't supposed to have, but military appointments are generally handled by the military. The reason given for this was that Ozzel supported Palpatine and his rise as Supreme Chancellor. During his time as a captain in the Clone Wars, Ozzel saw the clones under his command as assets, not men. He had no problem sacrificing their lives as more were being made to take their place. During a battle with Separatist forces on the ice planet Korm, Ozzel intentionally put his troops in danger so the Jedi that were on the planet with him would act brashly. The Jedi charged into the enemy lines to draw fire away from the clones, putting themselves in extra danger. Ozzel then had his ATTEs fire on the enemy, putting the Jedi in further needless danger. The troops and Jedi alike were furious with him. Ozzel just complained about the weather and pointed out that they won because of his tactic. Eventually, Jedi Master Plo Koon would override Ozzel and stop more blunt assaults that endangered the lives of more clones needlessly. Ozzel was serving under Jedi Master Toth when Asajj Ventress killed the Jedi. Ozzel took command of the forces and walked them directly into a trap. When in captivity, Ozzel broke under torture, no physical harm came to him, mind you, and betrayed the other two Jedi he was serving with. He never took responsibility for these types of things and always had justifications at the ready. There are actually quite a bit more stories of his in the Clone Wars, but by now you get the gist of it. Ozzel may have been arrogant and at odds with Vader and Piett in canon, but his Legends personality is that of an absolute weasel. Another part of Ozzel's legend doesn't fit with canon as it sits now. Ozzel was the presiding officer at Han Solo's court-martial. Solo was in the Imperial military when he saved a Wookiee slave, Chewbacca. It's funny to note that even within Solo's life falling apart at this time, he took a moment to note that Ozzel wasn't very smart. When the regime was undermined and replaced with the Empire, Ozzel opted to stay in military service. This decision came at a personal cost. Ozzel was engaged to marry a human woman. I couldn't track down a name. This woman had ties to a small rebel cell and approached Ozzel about leaving the tyrannical empire behind and fighting for the galaxy's freedom. Ozzel didn't waver in his original decision, and after a tear-filled final night together, never spoke to the woman again. After the Battle of Yavin, Ozzel was promoted to Admiral and elevated to the Joint Chiefs of the Imperial military. If this happened any sooner, Ozzel likely would have been at that faithful meeting aboard the Death Star where Vader exercised his ability in the Force, and later the majority of those in attendance were killed when the battle station exploded. There's another legend story that doesn't fit with the current canon, but it does involve a fan favorite character, so we're gonna dive into it. Before being promoted to the Executor, Ozzel captained an Imperial class Star Destroyer called the Reprisal. This was a solid assignment, but Ozzel wanted more. He thought he deserved more. He wanted to be an admiral. He performed his duties with the Reprisal, going after rebel cells in the Shelsa sector, a massive stretch of space near the colonies region that had constant problem with pirates. Ozzel got himself wrapped up in a plot to assassinate a mysterious woman called Mara Jade. Very few knew Jade was actually the right hand of Palpatine himself. She was his assassin and Sith acolyte. This story also makes an aside to make sure that we know that Jade saw right through Ozzel when they met. She saw him as dim-witted. She was suspicious that he wasn't loyal to the Empire. That part was incorrect, but she recommended to Vader that he be watched. Vader and Naval Command brought Ozzel up to Fleet Admiral and placed him in charge of the Executor. At the time this legend was written, it was a clever way to take the expanded universe characters and have them influence the movie characters without retconning any of the story. Though I do think it's unlikely that if Vader caught even a whiff of betrayal, he would promote the person and bring him closer to an important position, rather than just choking him to death and throwing him out the airlock. Either in that legend story or in canon, Ozzel received the prestigious but incredibly dangerous position of running the Super Star Destroyer, the Executor. I've said that name a lot, and hopefully I got the pronunciation right this time. The massive warship was built for Grand General Cassio Tag. There was an incident where a cyborg named Silo almost stole the entire ship. Tag vouched for this man and was demoted for his choice. Silo is a really unique character. We'll talk more about him when I get around to covering the legacy and life of Dr. Chelli Afra, as he's more closely tied with that story than with this one. Tag was demoted. Vader received the ship from Palpatine. To rub some salt in the wound, Tag was ordered to serve aboard the ship he should have been in charge of. Vader force-choked Tag to death on the bridge of the ship right in front of Ozzel. Ozzel actually found the incident exciting, a feeling he probably wouldn't hold on to when he would find himself in Tag's place not too far down the line. Ozzel was called to a meeting on the lava-filled planet of Mustafar. Darth Vader had a private fortress there where he would spend a good deal of his time. Also in attendance was another true believer in the Empire's cause, General Maximilian Veers. The two had the misfortune of being tasked with informing Vader all about the negative ripples that came from the rebellion's success in destroying the Death Star. The destruction of the battle station strengthened the resolve of not only the rebellion, but many who were sympathetic and previously too afraid to act. Further Imperial projects were delayed due to resource management issues. The rebels themselves had gone to ground and were incredibly effective at dodging the Empire that was trying to stomp them out. Ozzel insisted on a tactic that would have a specialized death squadron systematically bomb entire planets. He saw shock and awe as the only move. He made the mistake of using the word ludicrous in not using the Death Squadron. Vader stopped him abruptly. The proper military man broke down and groveled for Vader's forgiveness at the use of the word. Ozzel, trying to recover his blunder, went on a bad-mouthing of the rebellion. He called them vermin, another word chosen very specifically that was about to blow up in his face. This time, it was Veers who intervened. He contradicted Ozzel, explaining how the rebellion was more like a weed. He said, "Weeds don't break in the storm. They bend, but when the storm passes, they're largely unharmed." In this analogy, the storm was of course the Empire. Not only did Veers contradict a superior officer, but he gave the rebellion some credit, a risky move. Ozzel was furious at the interruption, and the fury grew when he saw that Vader, who had just embarrassed him, took interest in what Veers had said. Despite this unfortunate meeting and similar encounters with Vader over his career, Ozzel was promoted to Fleet Admiral and was put in charge of the Death Squadron that he went out on a limb for at Vader's fortress. Vader outranked him in this, but being able to head Project Swarm was an honor and could have meant amazing things for Ozzel's future career aspirations. Project Swarm saw thousands of probe droids sent all over the galaxy. One of these droids sent information from the remote ice world of Hoth. The information looked like some form of settlement may have been there, but the evidence that it was the rebellion was fairly thin. Ozzel reviewed this information alongside Captain Firmus Piet and General Veers. Piet believed that this was their best lead. Ozzel was about to dismiss the information when Vader saw it. Vader overrode Ozzel and set the fleet on course for the Hoth system. Ozzel took command of the fleet as Vader retreated to his quarters. Being stuck in his thinking that brute force was the only tool, Ozzel jumped the entire fleet right over the planet Hoth. He thought it would intimidate the rebels, but all it really did was give them time to prepare. The rebels were already suspicious after the probe droid self-destructed when it was discovered. They threw up a planetary shield, making the bombardment the Death Squadron was supposed to deliver void. Piet was more than happy to deliver the news of Ozzel's poor tactical maneuver. Ozzel had done well for himself in his career, but he was constantly irritating the Dark Lord of the Sith, with bad calls and petty disagreements. Vader didn't care for the man, and Piet saw Ozzel as arrogant and stupid, which is a very dangerous combination. When Vader learned of this news, he opened a video call with Ozzel and Piet on the bridge of the Executor. He began choking the man with the Force. So far, we've been underestimating Ozzel's arrogance. Even as he was being choked by the dark side of the Force by Darth Vader, he thought that Darth Vader was simply reprimanding him and he would release this invisible grasp in time. Vader didn't. Before Ozzel's brain synapses fired their last, he thought of an alternate life where he joined the rebellion along with his fiancée. He would have been a spy against the thankless authoritarian regime he dedicated his life to. His mind brought him back to his childhood on Carida, where he ran on mountains in open, clean air. I guess we shouldn't besmirch the dead and give him this last living fantasy, but the guy was too stupid to be a spy. The Empire had a pretty dominant victory over the Alliance on Hoth, despite the opening move blunder. Because of the blunder, the rebellion was able to evacuate most of their personnel, so the loss was bad but not devastating. In future generations, Galactic Civil War historians surmise that if it wasn't for the Battle of Hoth, the Alliance may not have gone all in on the Battle of Endor just a year later. There were actually more legend stories than the ones that I covered here. They all amounted to about the same thing. Ozzel, in a decently high position, is part of an important mission or rubs shoulders with a legacy character and bungles the whole thing. It would be too long to list every story he was part of, but I'm confident we covered enough that you get the idea. I've read some of the expanded universe story involving Ozzel in the past, but through the course of a novel and not back to back to back, you don't see how much of an idiot he was made out to be in the EU. I love Legends, don't get me wrong, but keeping him at least somewhat capable makes for a more compelling story when we're looking at a high-ranking military officer. For more on General Veers, the officer who contradicted Ozzel right in front of Darth Vader, check out this transmission next.